Every RAG guide will tell you that chunk size matters. And you have small chunks, big chunks, different chunking strategies, you have overlaps. And for my specific project right now, I need to optimize that. And for that, and to also demonstrate it, I created two AWS Bedrock Knowledge Bases that are pretty much similar, where the only difference is the chunk size. And I want to show a demo of what that looks like and actually query it and see if indeed chunk size matters. So we have a data source S3 bucket that has pretty much all of the markdown files, the documentation for the AWS Terraform provider. So every document will basically have the following data. So this is a page from the Terraform registry. Again, this is the AWS Terraform provider. And you have the document for a resource. And that is what I loaded to the knowledge base. So first, let's talk about what chunking is. And I'm not going into too much depth, but I just want to illustrate what these chunks look like. So a chunk could be maybe a word, splitting up the document to different words and storing them like that. But then you don't have a lot of context. You could do bigger chunk sizes. Some will fit sentences, some will fit paragraphs, and some could even fit the whole page. Now, the smaller the chunks, the better performance, you don't want to mix too much context. It also costs quite a bit. So you try to find the sweet spot between having a lot of context in your chunks, but then not having too much. So let's say that we take a smaller chunk size that will fit pretty much this very short paragraph. This is nice, and it will let us retrieve everything here if we search for it. But then if we take the same chunk size here, what will happen is we might lose the connection, right? We might lose the context. There will be less context for the agent, and we might miss the connection between allocated storage to apply immediately, if there is one. To offset that, you have something called overlap. So that means that if we don't just save just this sentence or this paragraph, we also save maybe this part as well. So there's an overlap between these two chunks, and that means that we may get more context, and this will help us pull the next one as well. The LLM will say, the search will say, okay, so you're looking for this is relevant, but you know what? You should also look at the next one. And that overlap means. So I'm going to actually show you an example of these two knowledge bases, these two RAGs that I created in AWS Bedrock, and actually see the difference. As I mentioned, we have two knowledge bases that are identical except for one parameter. So they're using the same embedding models, they use the same data source, they use the same everything except for the chunk size. So this one has the max tokens of 300 for the chunk size, and then the next one has 1500, and that's the chunk size. So one will take more of that same document. So this one will take larger chunks, and then the other will have smaller chunks. But we need to actually test it. So here's what I'm going to do. Now we'll test the first knowledge base. So this is the knowledge base with the smaller chunk size. I'll give it a small test with a question to see how it performs, and then we'll ask the second model the same question and see how that behaves. So let's choose a model. I'll do Claude Haiku. And then let me paste in the question. We're asking it about a default value of one of the resources. So we're looking at the AWS RDS instance, and let's see what that tells us. Yep, simple. It gives us all the information that we need. Let's do this. Let's look at the information. Let's look at the actual chunk. So you see the actual chunk it used. And you can see that we have the default interval here. The default is 0. It works. Now let's see the same query on the second knowledge base, and we might expect different results there. Now the same question that we're asking the model, but this time we're looking at the larger chunk size model. Let's see what the result will be. Oh no, there's no answer. Let's try that again. Okay, so it's giving us more information. Well, search results, including in the documentation. So it did something a little different. And let's see if we have the chunk size here. This chunk, the bigger chunk, basically is showing that we have a lot of text, but this is not the results for monitoring interval. So I think what happened was that somewhere in the middle, because we used fixed chunk sizes, the correlation between monitoring interval and the AWS DB instance and the default value were basically cut off from the same context, from the same chunk. And then there's no real connection. So you see it lost, even though we used a bigger chunk size, right? It's supposed to contain more information. Because we used fixed size, maybe there's not enough overlap. What happened was it's not finding the results. So here's an example where maybe a smaller chunk size for that specific task is better. The next question is, what do I need to configure to enable low downtime updates for an AWS DB instance? Let's see if this time it will have all the information. Okay, and we see the answer. We can see the details that we have. Again, you can see the bigger chunks, right? We have source chunk. This is a bigger one. And then you have the information. You can see the answer. Now let's look at the smaller chunk size. This time we're going from bigger to smaller. So this is the smaller chunk size model. Same question. Okay, it has information. You can. It is a different kind of answer. You can see that the chunk size is much smaller. Actually, a clearer answer, again, with the smaller chunk size. And there's no actual code example. So both cases kind of worked, but the answer is completely different. Well, what did we learn from this experiment? Well, we saw how different chunk sizes pull different information. And also, we found an interesting thing that was a bit counterintuitive. I imagined that the bigger chunk size will actually perform better, but we saw that it didn't actually matter because fixed chunk sizes can break off information just in the middle and lose context. And in this case, smaller chunks actually performed better for this specific document. Now, it is very interesting to see that different types of data, different types of documents will have better performance with different chunk sizes. So my conclusion is that it's not the actual chunk size, it's how you use it. And for my use case, I'm going to experiment more with this to see what is optimal. Should I give bigger chunks? Should I have more information in that? This is a fairly complicated problem, right? You also have parsing issues, right? We're parsing the document. It has all sorts of other elements in it that we need to understand. You have code. Sometimes you have images. And the idea is that, again, knowledge bases are not something you just deploy and forget about them. You will need to optimize them. And each project is unique and needs special attention. And that's the main thing I wanted you to have. So this wraps up the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to see more of this content on AWS Bedrock. And like this video if you liked it. Run your own experiments. Let me know what worked for you, which chunking strategy was right for your project. Let me know if you tried something, if you learned something about this, because I'm actually learning along the way and trying to optimize my own projects. So see you in the next video.